You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is May 29, 2023, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. Today, we have a special guest with us. It is Jacob Hornberger. He is the founder and president of the Future for Freedom Foundation, and he is also a candidate for the 2024 Libertarian Party nomination for the U.S. presidency. So welcome to the show, Jacob. This first show, we're going to kind of get to know Jacob and about his campaign running for presidency as the Libertarian, to try to become the Libertarian Party nominee for presidency. So Jacob, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got involved in running for this position?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. You know, over the years of my life, I've often been accused of being a knucklehead, so I feel right at home with you guys.
There you
go. So I started out my professional career as a lawyer in my hometown of Laredo, Texas. I was a trial attorney for 12 years, and that was my first passion in life ever since I was a kid. And then I discovered libertarianism, and that became the bigger passion in my life. And so after 12 years of doing trial work, both jury trials and non-jury trials, I decided to leave the practice of law to become program director at the Foundation for Economic Education in New York. And then 2 years after that, I founded the Future of Freedom Foundation. And soon after I started FFF, I joined the Libertarian Party. I would serve 3 terms on the platform committee. And then I ran for the presidential campaign 3 years ago. And then I'm in the race again this time. And the reason I'm running is, you know, these Democrats and Republicans, they're taking our country down, guys. I mean, we all know that as libertarians. They've got this massive death machine that inflicts death all over the world, including here in the United States. Martin Luther King called it the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. They've destroyed our liberty here at home with their welfare state and their drug war and their regulated society. So I'm running to bring a free society to America, to raise people's vision to what the genuine principles of a free society are. And hopefully the Libertarian Party will play a critical role in leading America out of this deep statist morass that both Democrats and Republicans have plunged our nation into.
And Jacob, before we go any farther, I'm going to invoke our invisible hand. Can you? Great! Our invisible hand was right on it. Wanted to bring up your page. This is jacobforliberty.com. That's where you can go to find out more on the campaign, and the Future for of Freedom Foundation that he mentioned, that's here too. So and it's called fff.org. Leon, were you about to jump in with a question? Sorry, I didn't want to.
No, I just was going to ask Jacob, tell us a little bit more about this organization that he founded here and what exactly it does.
Well, the Future of Freedom Foundation's mission is to present the principled case for the libertarian philosophy. In a sense, it's the think tank or educational foundation counterpart to the Libertarian Party's motto. The Libertarian Party's motto is a party of principle, or the party of principle, which would imply that the party adheres to libertarian principles. Well, that's FFF's mission. And in the 34 years we've been in operation, I can tell you that we have never compromised any aspect of the libertarian philosophy. We have adhered strictly to principle. We have never called for reform of any welfare, warfare state program. So, Leon, it wouldn't surprise you then that I'm bringing this mindset over to the Libertarian Party in my campaign. That's what distinguishes my campaign from all the other presidential candidates in the race and who will be in the race. They will be characterized by reform, reforming Social Security, reforming Medicare, reforming the welfare state, criminal justice reform. If you look at my homepage on my campaign, you'll see I open up right off the bat with open the borders. Well, there's going to be hardly any, if any, Libertarian Party presidential candidates that want to open the borders completely. They're going to have some sort of reform there, secure the border. Abolish Social Security and Medicare. That's the next issues. You're not going to have a presidential candidate in the Libertarian Party that calls for that except for me. So, and this is what I've been saying for 30 years here in the party. our principles are our greatest asset. And so I want to be the party's nominee because not only do I believe that these principles will lead America to freedom, I think the only way to garner votes. The reform message we know does not garner votes. It's a loser as far as garnering votes. The principle message is the winner in terms of garnering votes.
So in terms of, I mean, without getting too much into the weeds of your campaign, you just said you would like to abolish Social Security. I mean, that to me is a good thing. But what do you do about the people who are currently in the system?
What do you do with a person who is working in a business that is caught embezzling funds for 20 years? You know, I mean, you tell them you're no longer going to live off these embezzled funds, and that person has to manage. Look, there's a lot of wealthy people that are receiving Social Security checks that don't need it. They use it to buy their golf balls or to get car washes on their Cadillacs. There's a sector of seniors that might have to go to work. They might have to adjust. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm a senior and I work. So there's nothing inherently wrong with working when you're older. In fact, to me, it's a positive to be working. You stay involved with society and young people and so forth. Now, there's the desperate people in society. Let's say there's people in the cancer ward or just somebody really poor. Well, that's where family values come into play. Children, grandchildren coming to the assistance of their parents and grandparents and having an opportunity to repay what their parents and grandparents have done for them. If children don't come forward, there's church groups, there's neighborhood groups. I have no doubts that immediately wealthier middle-class people would form the foundation for former Social Security recipients, where everybody could donate to that, and then they would go out and give grants to people that needed it. This is what the genuinely free society, and it shows faith that freedom works. If we libertarians send a message out, which is the message that's been sent out for 30 years, that freedom doesn't work, that you can't just abolish these socialist programs, then how do we ever expect anybody to believe that freedom works? I have absolutely no doubts that you could repeal Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the whole welfare state today, and everybody would be fine.
It does seem like, you know, with some of these, once you get that big government distortion in there, screwing everything up, because I certainly think most of libertarians would certainly agree with you. We shouldn't have any of these programs, but maybe we might need a step program to get to where we want to go, maybe, because you certainly imagine that there's some people who certainly could go back to work, but maybe there's somebody who's been retired for 10 years and they're not capable, they don't have any job skills anymore. It does make you wonder, if you just shut that light off right at once or on that government program, then, you know, would we, I guess, would the transition not be too unpalatable for the rest of society and getting them over to the libertarian position?
Well, keep in mind two things. First of all, there's children, there's grandchildren, there's neighborhood groups, there's foundations. We have to show confidence that this is how freedom works, a free market society where people voluntarily help others. I have no doubts that they would come through for people truly in need. Remember, we lived without Social Security for more than 100 years. But the second thing that we have to keep in mind is the non-aggression principle. I mean, this is the core principle of the libertarian philosophy. It is also, by the way, a pledge that every Libertarian Party member is required to take as a condition of joining the party. And we call ourselves the party of principle. So if you're going to have this transition, you're talking about initiating force during this transition. You're going to need the IRS to go out and collect that money. And what you're really suggesting is we need the IRS to show that we're good, caring, and compassionate. Well, there is nothing good and caring, compassionate about the IRS. We know that. This is force, audits, harassment, haranguement, liens, confiscations, incarceration. What they did to Irwin Schiff, for example, the famous tax resister. There's nothing compassionate about this transition basis. And it violates the very pledge that we all sign. I mean, if we're going to have a party where we're violating the very pledge we're required to sign, then what's the point of having the pledge? And that pledge automatically is violated during any period of transition. You're initiating force, whether it's 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. Some people want to do the transition for 50 years, cover everybody who's like 50 years old today.
Yeah.
Well, Jacob, there's one. Okay, we wouldn't get too deep in the weeds on this, but there one little clarification here. There's certainly a property rights issue here, is there not? Because people paid into that system, as corrupt as it is. Okay, really and truly, our fellow citizens, myself included, I'm sure Jason also, we paid into that system. So don't we have some kind of property rights that need to be honored? Wasn't there like a contract between us and Social Security that said, well, you pay into this system for so long and we will pay you back out so much and that kind of stuff? There was some kind of contractual obligation there. Isn't there some kind of property rights issue here at stake?
Absolutely none. None at all. This is a straight welfare state program. There's no contract. It's just a grant of free money from the state. You didn't put money into anything. You were taxed. You paid a FICA tax, but even if you hadn't paid the FICA tax, Social Security would continue. They just pull it out of the overall income tax funds. In other words, you've got the IRS collecting taxes on one hand, and then you've got welfare state programs on the other. Food stamps, which are no different from Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, farm subsidies. Nobody puts their money into any of these funds. There is no fund. It's just a straight tax program on one side, welfare programs on the other. In other words, if they repealed these welfare state programs today, food stamps, for example, food stamp recipients could not sue and say, you breached my contract because I put my money in, you owe me my food stamps. Same thing with Social Security. It's a straight welfare state program. They spend the money you pay in taxes is spent as soon as they get it. It was the money you spent paid in taxes 20 years ago was spent on invading Iraq or invading Afghanistan. The money that you're receiving today is coming from young people, who many of whom are having a very difficult time starting out in life. And the reason they're having such a hard time is a lot of their money is going to the IRS to fund Social Security recipients. Well, this is a bad system. It has nothing to do with care and compassion, and it's really destructive. Look at the mindset of dependency that it creates among seniors. I mean, how many times have I heard, oh, Jacob, I'd die in the streets. I'd die in the streets. This is like a political narcotic. It destroys a sense of self-reliance and can-do and independence. It weakens a society. It doesn't strengthen a society. It weakens it because of that mindset of dependency.
It almost seems like a contract that we tried to establish with the mafia. Right? I mean, they told us they're going to take the money, and we said, "Oh, great, you're going to do this for us." And then later on, well, hey, you're not doing it for us, but hey, we're the mob. What did you want? What did you expect?
Yeah. Well, and then let me just bring up the practical side of this. I mean, that's the principle side, but I talked about getting votes. I mean, we're a political party. We're not a debating society. We're not an educational foundation. I know about educational foundations. I run one. This is a political party. Our job is to lead America to freedom, but we do that by getting votes. And there's this mindset in the party that we have to do what's practical, Jacob, because we got to get those seniors to vote for us. Let me tell you something. Seniors are never going to vote for libertarians. It's just not going to happen, except libertarian seniors. But the regular seniors, you can scratch that vote entirely off. That this notion in the party that we need to focus on senior votes is ridiculous, because why would they vote for us? They know that we want to get rid of this program. As soon as they hear privatization or opting out, they're out of there. They're going with the Democrats and Republicans. So from a practical standpoint, that's a loser position, Social Security reform. What we need to be doing is calling for the principal position and concentrating on getting young people's votes, saying you're no longer going to have to pay these taxes and Social Security. You're going to have a lot more money to have a down payment on a house or to go buy a car. And then you have the responsibility of taking care of your parents if the need arises. Now you're talking about practical politics. And this is what I'm saying is the campaign of principle that I'm offering is a vote-getting principled campaign as compared to the reform campaign.
Well, Jacob, one of the things I wanted to steer you back towards, you mentioned this early on in the conversation, that when you were a trial attorney, that's when you discovered liberty. One of the problems we have is almost all of us go through this state monopolized education system, and it's not a sure thing that any of us even discover liberty. So what rang your liberty bell? How did you come to discover these principles?
Yeah, that's a fascinating way you phrase that question, because I was a product of public schools, and I got indoctrinated in public schools. When I went back to Laredo to practice law, my hometown, I was a liberal Democrat. I really believed that government should be taking care of the poor and the needy and the disadvantaged. I was on the Legal Aid Board of Trustees, which provided free legal care to the poor. I was the ACLU representative in Laredo. And then I walked into the public library one day. I was in my late 20s and looking for something to read. I was kind of disillusioned with politics. And so I see these 4 little books there on a shelf, different colored books. They were called Essays on Liberty, volumes 1 through 4. And I pulled them off the shelf and they just blew me away. I mean, it was a straight road to Damascus experience. I checked all 4 of them out, pored over them, read them again and again. And the thing about these books, they had been published by the Foundation for Economic Education 20 years before, where I ultimately went to work. But they were hardcore principled essays. There were none of this reform crud of Social Security privatization, health savings accounts, and school vouchers. They were direct, principled libertarian essays. And I have no doubts that that's what was able to break this encasement of indoctrination in my mind that I had received in the public schools, and to a certain extent, the state-supported college I went to and the state-supported law school. And so that's why FFF has always maintained this methodology of just put out the principal message in the marketplace, because it'll find libertarians. I've learned over the years that you cannot convert people to libertarianism. I mean, I've got family members that love me, and they don't want to have anything to do with libertarianism, and they understand it. They just don't want it. And so you can't convert people. So our job is to find people like us that are naturally attuned to libertarianism and go, wow, this is the way I feel. And you do that by putting these sound principled ideas in the marketplace, either on the ideological realm, think tanks, educational foundations, or in the LP realm, the political realm. Both sides coalesce and reinforce each other. But if you advocate just reform, all you're going to do is find the reformers, and you're going to keep the tyranny in place. Mm-hmm. You know, an example I use is slavery. That if we got magically transported back in some Star Trek fashion to 1855 Alabama, would we call for reforming slavery? Well, I think some libertarians would. They'd say, Jacob, slavery is here to stay. It's in the Constitution. There's nothing we can do about it. Let's be practical and get laws enacted that call for fewer lashings, better work conditions, fewer worker hours. I say, no, let's just stand for liberty, abolish slavery. The others might say, well, Jacob, it's cruel. The slaves don't know how to work. They don't have a work ethic. They never started businesses. We need to gradually get rid of slavery. I would say, absolutely not. You got to have faith that freedom works. You free the slaves all at once. You just push that button. The same thing I say should happen in the welfare state.
That's an excellent example too, to sort of talk about what we were talking about earlier, when there's clearly this property rights issue where people say, wait a second, I had a property right. But clearly we're sitting here saying, wait a second, this property right is completely immoral. I mean, it contradicts all of our ideas on liberty. so yeah. Well, as far as things go, you know, if you were to win the presidency, what are the top ways you would move? I mean, certainly you're talking about repealing all these things. Do you imagine you'd be able to repeal them all at once, or are there certain targets where you would hit first, you know, and gradually work your way to a reformed society? Exactly how would you approach it?
Well, you know, it's fun to fantasize these things, but as long as we keep our feet on the ground and realize, you know, what's realistic. I mean, look, a libertarian president, obviously has to comply with the laws and the Constitution, the kind of system we live under. And you can't just issue a decree ending the drug war. You got to go to Congress, and you got to call on Congress to legalize drugs, which is what I would do. I'd say, this thing's been a fiasco. We can't just legalize marijuana, legalize it all, and get the state totally out of it instead of this licensure business. But you have to get congressional permission for that. But in the meantime, you can pardon every single person that's charged with a drug offense. As soon as the DEA arrests somebody, you pardon them. And so you can wreak havoc on their system. You can bring all the troops home from everywhere and just abandon all foreign military bases and discharge them into the private sector. You can pardon all the people that are crossing borders and being charged with illegal entry. Or either a misdemeanor or a felony. You can pardon Julian Assange and Edward Snowden and Ross Ulbricht and all people that are sitting in a federal penitentiary with a nonviolent drug offense. And then you can call on Congress to repeal these welfare state programs, but clearly Congress would be filled with Democrats and Republicans. They're not going to repeal Social Security or Medicare overnight, which is what I think should be done. But you can set that tone of where you want America to go. And then you can tell the American people, look at this obstructionist Congress. There's congressional elections in 2 years, and I would assume there's going to be libertarians running for every single congressional spot in America. Give them a shot and push these Democrats and Republicans out of there so we can move America in a better direction.
So, Jacob, what you earlier on you had mentioned about the borders, and the border should be open. So what the present condition that we have at our southern border, what would you do about that as president?
Well, again, we go back to the practical problem. You have to get congressional permission to abolish the Border Patrol. Let me just state what the ideal is, what I think should be done. Okay. And then we can look at the practical side if hypothetically a libertarian, if I were president. But I favor open borders, and that's the case I would make as a Libertarian Party presidential candidate. And past candidates and present candidates are loath to do that. They want to secure the border like Republicans do, like Democrats do. I want a completely open border. I want to abolish the Border Patrol, abolish the Immigration Service, and have the free movements of goods, services, and people across borders. I mentioned earlier, this death machine, this federal death machine that we live under. This is part of that death machine. Massive amounts of foreigners die every year because of this socialist system of immigration controls. And it is a socialist system. That's why there's chaos and crisis. And I've seen it up front. I grew up on the border. I lived almost half my life on the border. I've seen this crisis perpetually all my life. And the reason it's in crisis is it's a socialist system. It's based on the socialist system of central planning. And it comes with death. It comes with suffering. It comes with a police state. A lot of libertarians who support these things, they often forget that when they support immigration controls, they're supporting a police state. You've got warrantless searches of farms and ranches along the border. You've got highway checkpoints where they stop people who have never even been into Mexico and search their vehicles and their persons. You've got roving Border Patrol checkpoints. You got raids on private businesses, boarding Greyhound buses. There is only one solution to this, and I've said this for the 34 years I've been running FFF. Open the borders. There's no other solution to this crisis. If you open the borders, the crisis goes away immediately. Because think about it. You open the borders today, you won't even know who you're interacting with tomorrow. You don't know whether the person's a citizen or not. And you don't care. I mean, do you go around asking people what their citizenship is when you interact with them today? And so as a practical matter, this is the only way to bring an end to this part of the federal death machine. And for me, it's a vote getter. This is the practical side of this thing. I've been telling libertarians this is not a liability. This is an asset in a political campaign. It's a vote getter, not among Republicans. You see, the attitude always is we need to target Republicans for votes. Well, you're not going to get Republicans to vote for this position. But I don't target Republicans for my votes. I attack Republicans just as I attack Democrats. There's other sectors of society that will come and vote for us because they like this position.
Well,
So
Jacob,
what? So
well, hold on, Leon. We're starting to get close to the end of the show, so I got to kind of home it in here. And we can talk more about immigration on the next show, where we're going to talk to Jacob more about the issues if you want to drill deeper. But
Sure.
What I wanted to ask you, Jacob, is obviously it's an uphill climb for anybody who's running for office as a libertarian, just to get that notoriety out there and everything else. What is your plan if you are become the nominee? What's your plan to sort of get that attention, and what do you need from the Libertarian Party to help you do that?
Look, there's always that window of opportunity right after the nomination where the mainstream media does focus on the libertarians. They do profiles and what we stand for and so forth. That window of opportunity needs to be seized upon. And the reason that it fizzles out is because libertarian campaigns are boring. Presidential campaigns are boring. Look at the last several campaigns. I mean, they put you to sleep. The thing that excites people are our principles. I guarantee you, if you've got a presidential candidate that's calling for the repeal of Social Security, the repeal of Medicare, open the borders, bring all the troops home, dismantle the national security state, dismantle the military-industrial complex, the CIA, the NSA, restore a limited government republic with just a basic military force. It's that message I've been arguing for a long time in the LP. That generates your media coverage. Because people are saying, my gosh, look at this candidate. He wants to open the borders completely, wants to abolish the Border Patrol. And then you build on that because people say, wow, I've never heard that before. This guy's making sense. And then it starts to steamroll. It's sort of the same as my discovery of libertarianism. It's like aha moment, like road to Damascus. That window of opportunity for a month after the presidential candidate is nominated is where we should be seizing with our principles themselves.
Well, certainly this sounds like a really positive message to get out there. Do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share with the audience? Because we're just about to wrap up for our public access show here. And James, can you pull up his webpage again too, just so we can see Jacob's webpage?
Yeah, the other thing is that you'll notice that, other libertarian presidential candidates usually concentrate on 2 or 3 major issues that they feel are popular, like abolish the Fed. I take a position on every single burning issue of our time. I think I've got 23 positions there, both in written and in video form and in Spanish, because I'm fluent in Spanish. Because I want people to understand where I stand on every burning issue of our time. And I want people to see what we libertarians stand for. As I indicated earlier, this is our greatest asset. And we need to fight as libertarians. And that's what I want. I would love to win this nomination, to go in there and fight as a libertarian against both Democrats and Republicans. I'm also posting 3 to 5 minute videos about 3 times a week, going after DeSantis, Trump, Biden, Kennedy, and the major candidates in the other parties. I'm using this period of time from February up to about November to show people what kind of campaign I would run against those guys.
Well, thanks so much, Jacob, for letting us know that. And by the way, if you enjoyed this, we're going to have another show with Jacob that you can check out online, where we're going to dive into all the issues. But thanks again, Jacob, for joining us, and thank you out there for joining us as well. And until the next show, stay tuned and stay free.
yes, indeed.
Thank you, guys.